Hello and welcome to Esri Fire and Emergency Services webinar series. Today we're going to discuss data analysis for the fire service. So thank you for joining us and spending the afternoon with Orland Park Fire Department. A couple of rules of engagement here. We'll use the chat window to ask any questions, and if for some reason we don't get to your questions during the broadcast, we'll answer them in a follow-up email. There will be 3 interactive poll questions. Please take a moment to answer those. We at Esri use that to try to determine some of our customer needs and some of our user needs. The recording of this entire webinar will be posted online in a couple of days, and we'll also send an email with all relevant links discussed during the webinar to all participants. So we are happy to have Steve Rivero. He's an engineer with the Orland Park Fire Protection District, and also a personal friend of mine and one of my heroes in using data to make good decisions for the fire service. And he's the primary GIS professional for the Orland Fire Protection District. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
No, thanks, Mike. Like Mike said, I'm still a career firefighter with the Orland Fire Protection District. And I love to use that experience and the time on the streets to try to bring that to the GIS side. And I've been doing GIS for about 12 years now. And it's funny because I look at you, Mike, as one of my mentors and pushing me through GIS and using your guys' software to help out our community as well as the surrounding communities. So thanks for that introduction, Mike.
And thank you, Steve. And yeah, I'm Mike Cox. I'm the Fire and EMS industry manager for Esri. And essentially, I'm your liaison officer for all things GIS related to fire and EMS. So certainly my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. Reach out to me at any point, email, cell phone, whatever the case may be. But one of the expanded use we're seeing in the fire service is web GIS, and the ability to have boots on the ground using the technology day to day and using the platform to make good decisions to communicate with outside partner agencies. Obviously we still need that GIS professional. We still need, that backbone of our GIS program within the fire department or within the fire service. But web GIS really simplifies the use of GIS day to day. So we see it during special events, no notice events, disaster response, and day-to-day operations, which Steve will get into a lot of that today as he discusses the progressive manner they're using GIS to address accreditation issues and day-to-day performance measures, and then operational issues day to day. What does WebGIS look like? It's our cloud-based ArcGIS Online or AGOL environment, and it allows anybody with any device, as long as you have connectivity and a web browser, to really get into deploying and employing GIS to improve or add efficiencies to your response day to day. And as we deal with emerging threats and issues that we may not have considered 10 or 15 years ago, you think about the wildfire issues in the West, you think about the opioid crisis nationally, we can't continue to just hire firefighters and build fire stations to throw at these problems. We have to find ways to build efficiencies into our response. And one way to do that is to leverage technology. And GIS is a base platform that allows us to combine all types of information for any mission. So whether you're in a command post, you're in the field collecting data, and using data to do your operations day to day, whether it's partner agencies, your elected officials to be able to tell stories to justify your resource needs, and certainly the citizens, the two-way, whether it's public information or social media data that we can use to make good decisions. So that web GIS platform, it's scalable, and it allows you to interact not only with your personnel, but anyone you need to collect or give good data to get the right data to the right person at the right time. And you can bring in any type of data, and that's what's so impressive about it, or one of the reasons it's so effective is not only do we provide data in the Living Atlas, which Steve's going to talk about during his presentation, but any data you can get a hold of. So whether it's the data you already own, your tax parcel data when you're doing risk assessments, or your CAD and RMS data to make decisions and identify trends in your day-to-day responses, that data can be interwoven into one visual product or into one decision-making product to provide to your decision makers and, again, your partner agencies and things of that nature. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve to start his presentation on data analysis in the fire service. Steve?
Thanks again, Mike. So we just start right in on this and see there's on the slide, there's a dual title. And the reason I put that on there is because when we deal with GIS and the fire service, we're dealing with either GIS professionals that are trying to help the fire service, or we're dealing with a fireman that's learning GIS, trying to help his department. And as we'll see later on, there's a gap in the language that is spoke from the GIS professional and the fire service. So basically, when it comes down to analyzing GIS data or analyzing data using GIS tools, what we're trying to say is we're just trying to help the leadership in the fire service make better decisions. We're trying to give them the tools that they need in order to succeed. So when we're looking at these tools, and this became very apparent to us recently, we had gone through accreditation. The big problem that we have is data problem. That's common in the fire service. We don't have a problem collecting the data. We collect data all the time. We collect data on our fire reports, on our EMS reporting. We collect data through fire prevention, through public education. We even collect more information when we're running incidents and going out for fire alarms that are out of service, or for somebody's carbon monoxide detector going off. We fill out forms. So the fire service is very good at collecting data. The problem is we have comes in when we try to visualize that data, or we try to use the data that we collected so that we can make decisions. And that's the problem with the fire service right now. And again, that became very apparent when we started working with accreditation, is visualizing the data. And the visualizing the data, we see that there's a couple areas that that are the big sticking points. One is complicated software. Now, the software is good at what its primary function is. For example, record management software is good at collecting the data and putting it into a system that is able to manage it. But sometimes the applications in which visualize that, such as in dashboards and reporting, becomes complicated or cumbersome. And then the fire service leaders or the officers usually complain about their data, saying, I don't think I have enough data. I don't think the data is correct. Garbage in, garbage out. Firemen are, we're in a rush. We just try to get it done with our shift, so the data might not be good. So we have the issue with software as well as data. But when we're going through the accreditation, not only do we have that issue, but it's compounded by the frustration that we get in dealing with this stuff and saying, I know what our responses are. I'm having a hard time showing it. I know where the trouble areas are. I'm just having a hard time showing it. We know the feeling in our gut, what it should say, but we just don't know how to make the data show that. And so that's a big frustration. That's a big internal frustration that we have, and that I see is very common in the fire service leadership. Is how do I show what I know? How do I get that point across? And we're just frustrated. We think that we should have the proper tools, that leaders from the fire company officer all the way up to the administrative chief should have the proper tools to do their job. And unfortunately, when it comes to analyzing data and looking at data in the fire service, we have to rely on technology to do that. And when that technology doesn't work or is cumbersome or fails, we have a tendency to just to put it down and not use it. We come from an industry in which there's no software or no web interface or no iPhone or iPad that has put out more house fires or saved more lives than we have. And so if we didn't need it, we don't need it now. We probably will never need it. And we have that attitude. But if we have the tools that we can use, we'll use them. So when we do this, when we look at the data and we say, well, why is this data so important, and do we really need it? Yes, we do, and we've been using it in the fire service. If we look at the street level and we respond to a scene of a structure fire, one of the first things that we do is we look at this fire, and the company officer then makes the decision. He does what's called a size up. He looks at the fire, where's the fire, what type of fire it is, and then he bases that evaluation and says whether he needs more resources or not. Same thing for a cardiac call. Look at the patient, the skin color, look at the surroundings, and then we use that information to decide, hey, which way are we going to go with this? Is this a medical call, a trauma call? Does this look critical or not? So we're always analyzing data, and then we use that data to make decisions. But the problem is once we get out of the company level or on the streets and we get into the administrative level, there is a direct impact on being able to analyze that data and make decisions that maintain the credibility of the officers or maintain the credibility of the chief that has taken a long time throughout his career to make himself look credible to not only to his personnel but to the public, and to maintain that public's trust, because the decisions they make at that level truly has an impact on the safety of the public. So we got to get past this, and the way we get past this data problem so that we can be successful at it is we use GIS. And we use GIS because we have to bridge the gap between the fire service and data. And while we have the tools to collect it, we don't have the tools to visualize it in the way that we need. And we need to have data that we can visualize easily, that works and tells us in the terms and the ways that we understand, and requires very little input. It's kind of just their type of applications. And GIS does a great job of bridging that gap. And Esri's done a great job of creating the fire maps and apps, templates, and the solutions that also connect to specific data that has to do with the fire service through their fire solutions. And so they've helped bridge that gap even easier. And so as we bridge that gap and we look at what happens, what needs to happen in order to visualize data, going through the accreditation plus working with other agencies, we've noticed that there are basically three major steps or three things that need to happen for the fire service. And we realized these when we started doing the accreditation. We realized that we need to use our data. We don't have to create data. We don't have to go make more data. We don't have to collect any more data to analyze anything. We already have a lot of data. And then if we use the so-called off-the-shelf components that Esri offers through their solutions, through their softwares, we can use those as a base to start with the tutorials and the help documents. It's easy to get going and start analyzing stuff. And then as we started doing that, because they're configurable applications and templates, we're able to configure them and make them more specific to our own agency. And in doing those two steps, then we're able to produce visualizations that represent a proper image that we need to convey not only to the internal customers or the firemen and the administrative staff, but to the external, such as the public or the elected officials. And we're able to do that in different ways because each component or each component of that needs to have it in a format and then they understand that's useful to them. So let's look at these three steps. The first step is you got to use your own data. And like I said, we collect a lot of data, but the biggest set of data that the fire service collected or that we collected was our RMS data, which stands for Record Management System data. So this is our EMS incidents and fire incidents. And so we were able to go ahead and collect it. And once we collected it, we were able to connect it to our Esri software, ArcMap and ArcPro, and look at the attributes table. And then we're able to pull out the attributes back in the table format, not only visualize them on a map, but pull them back out into table format. And then all we did is I was able to put it into a Google Sheets. And then from there, create pivot tables, all from our record management system, where we're able to create pivot tables and show the amount of calls per year by the hour of the day. And then this is kind of like a raw workbook that our accreditation manager worked with. So he created the graphs and stuff after I went ahead and I put the data in. So I only put one set of data in. It was our record management data, and then broke it out into the different tabs or the different components of that data. So broken down by month. And because we were able to use our the GIS software, and it was all our data has its addresses and could be geo-referenced, we're then able to break it out and say, well, this is how many calls happen in this still district or this area of our total response area, of all the area that our fire district's responsible for. This is our Station 1's call volume and Station 2's call volume. And again, all of this stuff comes from our record management system. So we didn't have to collect any more data or make any more. We just used what we have already been collecting for the last, since the last 100 years we've been collecting data. This stuff, we just went back 3 years for this to collect it. And then eventually the accreditation manager gave me a template, which is right here, and this points to all those tables. And so we can see that he has one sheet that it's broken down. All the incidents are broken down by year, month, hour, by the different units that responded to it, the benchmarks and what we were able to see. And all this came from our RMS data, which was very easy to extract and put together using our ArcMap and GIS tools. So as we move forward using our data, that, like I was showing you, not only are we able to pull out tables, but then we're able to create maps from it, and you can show where the incidents are. We get to create hotspot maps, and using just our incident data, we're also able to get performance measures, and being able to measure the performance of the service that we provide to the public lets us know the areas in which we need to improve, the areas that we're doing good. And once we put in plans or put into play processes or programs to improve services, being able to measure those performances will tell us if we need to adjust those plans or those programs, or if they're on track, or maybe we need to scrap them and start all over. But to be able to measure those performances is critical and stuff like that. And using just our RMS data, we're able to do that. Now, when we talk about using your data, there's more data that's available that might not be obvious, such as most fire departments already have wall maps, map books, as well as a city or a village that they work with that might have a GIS personnel, or even they might have wall maps or paper maps that we don't have. And so we could reach out to those agencies and we could get information. So this is just an example of our boundaries, and then each of the little areas inside are called still districts, or AORs, or area of responsibilities. And so if you didn't have this map, I've done it before with other agencies, I'll say just take a picture of your wall map, take a picture with your phone, and go ahead and send it. And then once we have the picture, we import it into ArcMap and geo-reference it, and then just trace the boundaries out. And so now we have a web map, or we now have a map, and we can publish it to the web, and it has the boundaries on it, all from a picture. And then we have an accreditation. You have to come up with planning zones, and we didn't have established planning zones, but we did have our map books. And so in this case, we just took our PDF map book and created an image from the front page where it had the map pages, and then geo-referenced it, and then created our planning zones that matched our map pages. So that was available to us. And once we did that and had our planning zones and our map pages, we were able to then export by those planning zones. And so here's a list that you see of what we call target hazards, where we need to have an extra heavy response just in case there's a problem there or a fire there. Maybe it's a school or nursing home or a healthcare facility. But it's broken down by those map pages, or there's planning zones. And this is critical to know what zones have what in them, so that we can go ahead and plan accordingly. And so now that we have the planning zones out, we can also then go ahead and reference other materials and other information, such as this is the population totals for each of those planning zones, as well as our risk populations. So under 5 years old or over 65 present a greater risk. And so now we know those planning zones that we might need to focus some community risk reduction, where we try to send out preventative measures, some public education to reduce maybe falls in people over 65, or maybe some child safety, lock the cabinets, protect the outlets for children under 5 and toddlers. And so when we're looking at this, we know that we don't have to put any resources to the planning zone, or very little resource to planning zone 19 or planning zone 3, but planning zone 1, we might need to put a little bit more effort in for people over 65, as well as planning zone 17, 18. So like business does, they do pinpoint marketing. We can use the same techniques in the fire service with community risk reduction. So this is a map of the zoning for the villages that we cover, that I got from the 2 villages that we cover, two villages, or one city and a village. So this is their planning zone. I didn't have to create it. They have a GIS department, so I asked for it, and they gave it to me in a format that plugged right into ArcMap, and so we were able to produce it. So while I'm not the source of this data, or while we're not the source of this data, this is our data. This is data that pertains to us. And then when we go a little bit further out and we look at counties, as well as national data sets, and even Esri's Living Atlas, there's a lot of data that's useful to us. And we can use that to pull down stuff that's specific for us. So for example, our demographics and population and risk categories could all be found at American Fact Finder. And they have everything that's tied to census blocks, census groups, census tracts, and there's linking fields where we can link the tabular data found here to the polygons that we'd use in ArcMap. And if we're missing those polygons and need them, we go to the American Census Bureau and to their Tiger Web, and this is where we get those census blocks and census groups and census tracts. And these blocks and tracts all have identifiers that tie them back to the tabular data that we'd find in American Fact Finder. And then if there's other infrastructure or structures or waters, or anything that has to do with layers that we're missing, a great place is the USGS site, the National Map Viewer. You could zoom into where you need to go, and it's very easy to then look for what you need. So if I'm missing structures, just click on structures and then say find products, and it'll search this area for these products, and it'll come up with a list of available structures for this area, and then I just pick which one I want and download it and just add it to my set. So there's a lot of information out there, a lot of data that's available out there that we don't have to create, that would fit our data, that fits for what we need. And we can use that data, and when we pull that data in, this is the streets data that we got from a national data set that had speed limits on it, and so we were able to then find out what the speed, how fast or how far can we get in a certain amount of time. And so everything in dark green or closer to the firehouses, all the way out to the yellow, is a travel time of 4 minutes or less, and anything in the red or the orange is greater than that 4 minutes travel time we need. And this is using a national data set, but that is available to us. And so by looking at it real quick, we have just a very few areas that might be of concern. And then this is the population density that we got from the demographic information from the government sites, as well as the census tracts for the sites, and we just combined them and we're able to come up with the population density. And this stuff is already configured. If you go to the Esri Living Atlas, a lot of this stuff is available and already configured, and you can use it with your AGOL or ArcGIS Online. it's there, and you can pull it right in, and you don't even have to go to the national websites. And when we start to pull all this stuff in together, then we could start to run a little bit of analysis on it and show our what are called catchment areas, or the areas that are covered within 4 minutes or 8 minutes of travel time. And so same thing here. We have a very good coverage of our district, and we're able to see that. Again, we didn't create any more data. We just used what is available to us to be able to do this and bring it into the solutions. So.
And Steve, I'll add to the excellent use of data from multiple sources. You know, that living atlas, and I know you're going to talk about it once or twice again during your presentation. The amount of data available to those of you online that likely already have an account, that you already own access to this data, is incredible. I mean, like he was just describing road networks and things of that nature, but live traffic, live weather, imagery. We have a Sentinel-2 program that you have updated satellite imagery every 5th day. So incredible amounts of information available in that living atlas. So right now we'll go to our first poll question. So please take a moment and answer the questions so we can collect your data. Does your agency produce regular data analysis reports from your records management system? And our potential answers here are: my agency does not develop reports, my agency uses primarily database style reporting products, or we use GIS to provide dynamic visual products for analysis. So again, does your agency produce regular data analysis reports from your records management system? And so we'll wait just a moment there, let everybody answer. And Steve, I know you're going to provide some additional products that you use to produce regular reporting for your decision makers and
Yes.
Elected officials and the like. And so here are our answers. So my agency does not develop reports at 19%. My agency primarily uses database style reporting products at 45%. And then a pretty good response, 36% use dynamic visual products for analysis. And so understand too, you know, some of these solutions that Steve's going to demonstrate or has already demonstrated, it's just a matter of getting the data, you know, out of those record management systems, out of your CAD systems, out of your reporting systems, and, you know, being able to produce those visual products for decision making. So if you need assistance with that or have some questions about it, certainly contact us after the webinar. So Steve, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Mike. All right, so like Mike just mentioned, it's the thing is the important part of this is being able to get the data out of those systems, which brings us to how do we do that? And we do that by starting with the Esri off-the-shelf components. And they have lots of them available to us, from their robust tools such as ArcPro and ArcMap to applications and templates at their website for their solutions. So when we look at a solution such as ArcGIS Pro, we're able to use ArcGIS Pro, and it actually has a button on it called ArcGIS Solutions, where when we interact with it, we're able to then pick one of the solutions that Esri already has, whether it's create wall maps or do pre-plans or target hazard analysis, and it will download that set of templates, and then it walks you step by step through the process of connecting to your data. And then once it's connected to the data, it actually then walks you through the process of being able to visualize that and being able to share that out. So ArcPro is very useful for that. Is very good at that step-by-step process in using the ArcGIS solutions, the Esri solutions for the fire service. And then when we still use ArcMap, it's very robust, and the amount of tools and what it can do, the heavy lifting it could do was paramount in going through the accreditation project. It's able to export. I mean, it's just the GIS professionals. This is the tool of choice. But when it comes to the fire service and the masses that are trying to get involved here, Esri does offer some great solutions at their solutions website. And if we go to their solutions website, and the links will probably be available at the end as well if you miss it. But their website is filled with stuff, and they have these solutions for all their industries that they deal in, and in the fire service industry. You just go down and you can see all the solutions that are have been tailored to the fire service, or we can use. Again, some of these plug right into ArcGIS Pro. Some of these other ones, and some of them you just download and you could start using them with your AGOL account. But when we talk about getting data out, this fire monitor, or this monitor fire incidents, is where you would want to start with it. Inside this this template right here, or this solution right here, it has scripting that is available to you, and it gives you the instructions on how to automate the data. So it walks you through all the steps on how to go ahead and get the data out of your RMS system, or once your IT staff exports it, how to connect it to this application. So then you can see the incidents live. And then that connection then can be used also for the analysis and for the performance indicators later on. And the nice thing about these solutions is it's a great jump off. It's a great starting place because if you just follow their instructions, you'll be up and running. And then because they're configurable, it's a great place to learn how to do more GIS, especially if you're a firefighter or somebody that doesn't come from a GIS background. It's a great place to learn, and then to start customizing for your own agency. And you know, and it's very helpful that these are very configurable. So, for example, this this identify target hazard solution, what it does is it uses a Excel sheet, and that sheet then has your risk hazards that we want to look at: height of building, what type of occupancy in it, the amount of water flow, and then it goes ahead and it color codes and it gives a risk hazard to the community based on parcel size. So that's where we got started, was with the parcel size, and then we were able to go ahead and configure it so that we used it, instead of doing it at a parcel size, we were able to use it for every single building. And then this is then produced a web map of buildings of the community risk. And if we click on a building, interactive, if we click on a building, we can see what the risk level is. Is it high, and what type of building it is? It gives us the total score, as well as a score of the individual categories. So these are all configurable in the application, and right out of the box we can go ahead and get the very similar results at the parcel level. And then if you want to go further and configure it for your agency, you can go ahead and do that.
And Steve, if I can make one comment on that workflow there, that target hazard, you know, that's more or less presented as a commercial analysis, right? But you were able to apply it to every single structure. So not only commercial occupancies, but to develop a risk analysis or risk score for your residential properties as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So you see a lot of departments, you know, they're doing the hazard and risk analysis based on a first due district, or, you know, a zone or something of that nature, where you look at, you know, we're 30% commercial in this zone, 70% residential. But most of our fire departments own the data to be able to go and do an analysis, much like Steve has done in Orland, to be able to look at every single structure and determine the risk, you know, not only to the occupants, but the risk to the firefighters. And as he said, customizable. So if you want to look at different aspects, as long as you have the data, you know, we had one of our firefighters was concerned about residential elevators. They had a close call with a residential elevator. So they were able to go back and pull the building permits and from their inspector's office, and identify on a map, you know, which of their occupancies had residential elevators, because those typically don't have, you know, annual inspections like a commercial occupancy would. So that data is out there. It's just, as Steve has done, it's a matter of finding it and applying the appropriate workflow to do that analysis. So we have another poll question, and this one is your agency using Esri solution templates for fire and EMS? So the one Steve just demonstrated, and again, we'll send the link out to that page so you'll have access to it, but please take a moment and answer the question here. Is your agency using Esri solution templates for fire and EMS? And the options are: my agency does not use the solution templates, or we have the templates, but we have not deployed them yet, and my agency uses Esri solution templates. So again, we'll take a moment and wait for those answers. And Steve, so when you started doing that hazard analysis at the parcel level, at the individual structure level, was it your intent to do all structures right off the bat, or were you looking at commercial first and just apply that same workflow to residential, or how did that work out when you were developing that system?
Well, because it's configurable, I noticed that it pointed to the parcel level or to the parcel layer, and the information was on the parcel layer. And so all I did was tie the buildings to the parcels, then pull the data from the parcel into the building. And then instead of pointing at a parcel layer, I pointed at the building layer.
That's great.
I just thought having the target hazard map would be great. And then when I realized where it pointed to, I didn't even think of like, oh, I should go this level further. It just made more sense to me. Because you might have one parcel that has 3 buildings on it, but only one of the buildings is a danger versus the other 2 buildings that aren't. So that's why I just went to the building layer.
Great use of the data. Great use. So our response to our poll questions, is your agency using solution templates? The first answer, my agency does not use solution templates, is at 60%. So I hope, or 61% rather. So I hope our folks can get to that web page and take a look, because again, if you have access to AGOL, which most of us online do, you already own those templates. So, and as Steve described, you can download them today and start using them. We have templates, but have not deployed them yet at 18%. And then we have 22% of the departments online are using the Esri solution templates. So excellent. All right, Steve, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Mike. So before we continue on I just want to jump back a little bit on that target hazard map. So while it was designed for looking at hazards for towards more on the fire side, we could do the exact same thing and change the requirements for EMS. So for example, we can change the requirements for falls, for burns, for trips, and as well as for fire-related incidents. So if we go to incident types, now we have a hazard map, and we are able to actually use it for the community risk reduction again. So now we can see which areas of our community where we need to start focusing certain preventative programs. So again, because they're configurable, it doesn't have to stay even in the category of just the fire side. We can then bring it to community risk. So when we are able to get the data out and we start able to use it, then it comes time, we have to start visualizing it. And again, it's real important to understand that depending on where you sit in this theater, if you're on the front lines or if you're in the company level as a fireman, you need to have different information versus if you're the public or an elected official. So now that we have the data, we need to visualize it accordingly to the audience that this is intended for. So, for example, when we started producing information on the accreditation, I not only was able to pull out the maps as well as the attributes and put it in a table format for the attributes, but then I started putting it together in a paper report, which our accreditation manager was able to look at, and then use those paper reports that we gave to him that we gave to him from the GIS side in his accreditation report. So some examples of that we produce are just some basic maps of our district. Again, using the national data sets and stuff and making sure we have the roads, we're able to get the attributes and show our miles that we are covered. The catchment areas or how far we responded again. These are the 4-minute and 8-minute catchments. Anything in green is 4 minutes. We could see the square miles of the district that we cover within those 4 minutes, which we know is the NFPA standard, or one of the standards that we are held to, as being able to get to an incident within 4 minutes or less. And then this shows that 4 minutes or less again in the streets. It tells us how much of our area is covered. And not only are we able to do that at the district level, at our total response area, but for each individual station's area, we're able to do the exact same thing and see what they're able to, their performances are. And then we're able to see what station for example, the station 4 happens to be my station, how long it takes to get to the rest of the district, how far can it go out, and get some of that information. So not only can we produce the maps and the images to go with it, but sometimes it's better to show the numbers. If they're visualized okay in a map, or they're not visualized very well in a map, to pull out the numbers. So this is a side-by-side comparison of some of the maps that we just looked at, but we could use the ArcGIS products or Esri products to get those comparisons, get these tables out, as well as here's a list of all the fire or all the EMS calls that we went in the last 3 years. That was able to be pulled out right from the software once we connected to the data. As well as we broke it down by the incident groups for the whole district, and again, we're able to do that at a smaller level for each of the stations. But then we're also able to represent this stuff in the incidents and hotspot maps. So for example, fires, we can see down the center, kind of spread out a little bit, but down the center of our district is where we have most of our fires, as well as our EMS calls. And with hotspot maps, then we could also start to see some trending or some hotspots. And when we look at our false alarms, we can see that it goes right down the center of our district, and that's because that's where all our commercial buildings are. And again, this is just using our EMS, our RMS data. We're able to visualize and start getting into performances, so we can see the response times and percentages. We're able to see that 46% of all our incidents, 46% of every incident that we respond to, we could actually get 5 stations there within the cover or within the national standard of getting multiple stations there, which is pretty good. And so we're able to visualize this using the maps and the text to help our accreditation manager understand what the data is saying and what it looked like. And so that was using the report maps, and we also have our ArcGIS online account, and we use it to make a lot of web applications and web maps, and we created a group for accreditation, and anybody who was involved in accreditation had access to the data, and they were able to make their own maps from there. But when it comes to showing this stuff to somebody that doesn't need to interact with it, that doesn't need to create anything or doesn't need to manipulate it, we found that story maps are the way to go. It just provides that story that needs to be told. So this is a fire department I helped that needed to do figure out how to relocate a firehouse. And while they understood the terminology and stuff, they needed to show their board and show their the public what the analysis was of their station relocation. So this is a story map that they actually put on their website, as well as presented to the board, and the public can go and they could scroll down, and it gives an overview of their study and why they needed it and how it was done and the results of it. And it's all done through a story map, and uses the data, and is just a very simple way to go ahead and demonstrate the analysis of that data to the audience that it's intended for. And then we have the dashboards, and the dashboards, again, you can start with the dashboards, ArcGIS Online, and you go ahead and you create your web maps, and then from there you create your dashboards and hook to the web maps and start, because it's again another configurable app, you're able to create dashboards specific for the intended audience. So this is a dashboard that looks at live feeds coming from our CAD, which is our dispatch agency. We own our own dispatch agency, but it's as if we were able to take the incident solution and instead of pointing it to our record management, you're able to point it to your CAD if that's something that you have access to. And so this dashboard shows live AVL feeds from our fire apparatus, so we could see who's moving around where, as well as the calls that are going on, and put a couple of little statistics in there, but made it as clean and simple as possible. So this is a dashboard intended for dispatch, or we could use it at the company level at the firehouses. But then when it comes to performance and looking what's going on with the accreditation and how we're doing on the day-to-day basis, that's what this dashboard is for. So we can see that on the left-hand side, it has incident counts, such as the daily count for today and the weekly count, monthly count, and it compares it to the same time period yesterday to this current time. So today we have had 10 calls today to this hour, while yesterday we had 24 calls to this hour. And then it has a couple other performance measures, gauges and bar graphs. On the right side, we can see the dispatch handling time of the calls. And these are over it's a rolling 14-day look at things. You can see our push-out times for the fire stations, as well as travel times. And the nice thing about these dashboards is you can build filters into them. So, for example, right now there's no filter on the station, but if we want to see a station, we can build a filter in, and then what it does is it goes ahead and it filters out automatically just for that station. So if we notice the numbers changed, if we go back and we'll do our station 1, see what they've done today, see how they're doing, see their performance. Station 5. And not only can we, on this particular dashboard, can we filter it for our stations, but we could also fill it for our incident grouping. So we're going to see our EMS calls or our rescue calls, and we can go to our false alarm calls that we go on so much. So these dashboards are not only customizable, but they're configurable, so we can have these filters and everything in there. But then we could always take a combination or a blend and take a dashboard or a couple of dashboards and stick them inside of a story map. So one thing that frustrates me as a fireman, and I know it's frustrating the fire service, is I think I have like 32 logons and 17 pages. I got different applications I go to. But this story map right here is a tab story map, and you're able to embed web pages and other maps and other dashboards into it. So this is one application. It's open. It has our active incidents map, the map you just, the dashboard you just saw on it. If I click on the stats tab, it will pull up the version of the stats of what's going on. Same thing, it's still configurable, it's still filterable. There's even a tab to get to our record management system. So if I want to put in an incident, I just log on in, and I can go ahead and start putting in information for a call that I was on or something. I can click on our pre-plan tab, and it'll pull up a pre-plan application that we have, where fire companies could go ahead and they could search for their assignments. I'm going to search Gold Shift Station 1, and it'll show me all my assignments that I have for this month, and then I just pick the building that I want to go to. And the nice thing about this is that it's live. If I were to make a change or make it add something to it, and then a couple minutes later somebody gets a call to that building, they saw the changes that I just made. And so this is just another web app that's put inside of a story map. And that's those are just some of the examples of a way to visualize the data once you have run it through the solutions and once you've made the connections.
Excellent, Steve. So we've got our final poll question. So is your agency developing data visualization products using GIS and sharing that information? So we are not using GIS for data visualization or information sharing. We're using static or paper maps for decision making. We use GIS to produce products on a regular basis, say a monthly report or weekly report, or we use live or near real-time GIS data to monitor operations, much like Steve just demonstrated. So again, is your agency developing data visualization products using GIS and sharing that information? So we'll wait just a moment or two. So Steve, while we're waiting for those folks to answer this poll question, so that story map, story map you just showed, that's relatively new for your agency, right? Have you had the ability to deploy that to decision makers or chief officers or anything? Have they given you any feedback on that? That's pretty incredible.
You know what? The applications inside that story map that we've had out, and they're at the performance measure application is out at every firehouse. It's up on the wall. So every station sees our performances all the time.
Nice.
We've used the pre-planned program before, as well as the live incident mapping. So they have not yet gotten this story map because I'm still building it out. But they've used every component of it, but just not as one unit yet.
That's great, though. That's a great product. So we got our answers here. So is your agency developing data visualization products using GIS and sharing that information? 19% are not using GIS for data visualization. 15% are using static or paper maps. 47% are using GIS to produce regular, or such as monthly or weekly reports. That's pretty impressive. And then 19%, like Steve just demonstrated, are using real-time GIS data to monitor operations. So great response there. And certainly if anybody needs assistance, again, with that dashboard view or importing that data or any of those issues, email me, and I'm sure Steve, they can email you as well.
Absolutely.
To get some guidance or assistance there. So quickly, Steve, before we move to the closing couple of slides here, I got a couple of questions from the audience. One is, what RMS system are you using to get your data? Is it ImageTrend for fire and EMS data, or?
Yeah, so it is right now we are using ImageTrend for both. But this data hooks to our previous record management system as well. So it combines two.
And it's really, it's kind of record management system agnostic, I guess, as long as you can get the data out of it. Steve, is that a good way to put it? And
yes,
we've dealt with multiple vendors as far.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it is it's not so much which record management system you're using, it's what database does it sit on. And most of them sit on a SQL database, or they're in the cloud. And if they're in the cloud, you can do an export and it comes out as a CSV file. So it's not so much what software you're using, it's what database it's sitting on.
Excellent. Another question, which I'll take there, is it says, are there any EMS specific templates? And there's two ways I want to answer this question. One is, as Steve described, some of these workflows can be easily applied to EMS issues as long as you have the data. So much as he described the target hazard analysis, being able to apply that to a community paramedicine type program where you're identifying whether it's a fall risk or some kind of chronic illness like a diabetic issue, or even applying it to some of our mental health issues and things of that nature. If you pull the CAD data into that similar workflow, you can identify where that risk is. And in addition to what may be available or what you may see in the solutions page for fire, there are multiple solutions under the health page. So that same website, that solutions.arcgis.com, has a health section. So a lot of our EMS focused solutions are there, and there's things for opioid issues, there's things for homelessness, and a lot of those would fall under health. And then the last question I have here, Steve, before we move on, is were you able to carve out single family dwellings into a risk score for different types of single family dwellings? So in other words, were you able to identify between, say, a 1,200 square foot rancher versus the 3-story, 5,000 square foot mansion?
So the data's there because it comes from we got it from the assessor's office. So it tells us not only the square footage, but the age of the house, the height of the house, as well as when we know the subdivisions and the areas that are built with truss compared to stick built. So yeah, we're able to take all that data and say, okay, what do we want to look for? Which is the hazard? Which is a priority to us? So some of the stuff we did, because other stuff we're like, well, that's not one of our priorities. But yeah, it's there, and when we're using it.
Yeah, and we've actually seen some departments integrate that data regularly, weekly, monthly, into the CAD system, so that on dispatch, the data is presented, through the connectivity in the truck, the MDC or whatever they're looking at as far as their CAD application in the truck. They can actually see what they're going to. So we know we're going to, a 5,000 square foot single family, and actually adjust the initial dispatch recipe. So we're not sending the same thing to a 7-Eleven or, a convenience store that we're sending to a 4-story hotel or something of that nature. So Steve, you can go ahead and advance there.
Okay. So as we went through this, we went through kind of like the three steps, and that was, use your data, use the off-the-shelf solutions that are available to you, and then if you want to customize it or you want to make it because they're configurable, if you want to make it deeper, go ahead. And then step 3 is just visualize it. And when we do those 3 things, and what we realized and what we learned is when we do those 3 things, the visualization of the data is it's actually pretty easy. It's not as bad as we thought, and the complication of software kind of goes away, and the data becomes very manageable and very usable. And then the accreditation manager, such as well as the fire officers, they're able to say, you know what, I thought that was right. I knew that was there. They're able to show what they knew from the start, but just we couldn't get it. And now we were able then through the dashboards start producing the tools that the fire service needs and the fire officers need. And when we're able to do that, then what we're able to do is accomplish what most fire departments would consider an extremely tough journey, and that's becoming accredited. And when you take a team and you give them the right tools, they can accomplish some great feats. And our accreditation manager is an outstanding lieutenant and put together a real good team, but relied on GIS to handle the data. And when you go through accreditation, they give you 3 years to accomplish it. And because of the team that he put together, but of course I'm a little biased and I say because of the fact that we're able to use GIS, instead of taking 3 years or 18 months, we're able to accomplish from start to finish this journey within 8 months, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, so we were able to do it within 8 months. And just to see the look on the chief's face, the accreditation manager with the other battalion chiefs on receiving the recognition of being an accredited and an ISO 1 department. I think there's only like 68 of them that have both in the whole U.S. You could see the pride that the leaders have, knowing that they're trusted, that they're going to maintain their credibility and still be able to prove and that they are providing a great service to the public.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That is rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple of announcements I wanted to make before we close out here. The Esri Fed GIS conference is January 29th and 30th in Washington, D.C. So even though it's the federal, you see a lot of state and local, certainly a lot of FEMA, DHS, DOD representation. So an excellent conference to participate in, and we'll have some paper sessions that are applied directly to public safety. And very exciting for us, the Esri Fire and Emergency Management Forum in Orland Park. So Steve's actually hosting this for us on November 1st. So if you're in that area, we'll have the link to the registration page on the follow-up email to this show, and be able to come out and spend the day with us and talk about these solutions and how to implement them. So again, Orland Park on November 1st. It's a 9 to 3 or 9 to 3:30 day of just different presentations, discussions, group discussions, and really talking about the solutions that Steve put together. So Steve, again, thank you so much for participating with us today. And I'm trying to pull up our contact information so that if anybody wants to grab an email here, you certainly can. And again, these contacts will be in the follow-up email for the webinar that comes out very soon. But Steve, again, I want to thank you so much. I want to commend you on the accomplishments you've presented here today, and obviously it's impacted your fire department, your personnel, and your community. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, and any questions that were not answered online here today, in addition to the links and the information just described coming in that follow-up email, we'll get those answers to the questions you submitted as well. So thank everybody for logging in, and I hope everybody has a good day. Thanks.